Tech by Tips.
Hello and welcome to another Tech by Tips video. Today's video we're going to be working with an application that has been requested a few times already in the channel, and here's two example requests that I've seen. One is from I Am DJ Greed and another one is from Pen Akira, and it says would love it if you made a video on UnManic. Been following your videos for some time now. And the other person says thank you for your videos, a good Docker that does the same is UnManic. So let's go ahead and see what this application is about. Honestly, this is not an application that I've used, but it looks very interesting. It looks like another type of TDAR type of application, and we're gonna set it up. I'm not gonna go deep into setting it up because, like I said, I have not used it yet. We're gonna get the container running so that then you can play with it yourself and get it working. So basically you can find the GitHub repository at github.com/unmanic/unmanic, and it says that it's a library optimizer, and this has been released 25 times, currently on version 0.28, and the main developer is Josh5, and there's 15 contributors to the repository, which is good. This is mainly written in Python, and it says that it's a simple tool for optimizing your file library. You can use it to convert your files into a single uniform format. So kind of like what I was saying, similar to TDAR, does file movements based on timestamps and executes custom commands against a file based on its size and stuff like that. So basically it says simply configure UnManic pointing at your library and let it automatically manage that library for you. And it says that it can do the main functions as stated here. So there's a scheduler that scans your library for files that do not conform to your configured file presets. So you have a way to specify a file preset, and then it'll look for files that do not match that, and then it's going to reprocess those files to make it match what you want. And they get added to a queue, and they get processed. And then it says there's a file directory monitor, which looks when a file is modified, and then or a new file was added to the library, that UnManic is able to test against that preset again on top, and then if it is needed, and it'll process that file. There's also a handler to manage the running multiple file manipulation tasks at the same time. So basically several workers that you can have at the same time doing work. And there's a web UI to configure, manage, and monitor the progress of your library. So like I said, very similar to TDAR it looks like, but based on what I saw, it not only works with video files, it seems to also work with other kinds of files like audio files, etc. So that's good. It says some examples of how you can use UnManic is transcoding a video or audio file into a uniform format. So let's say, for example, you have songs that are in WAV format and maybe MP4 format, and you care to have everything in MP3, it can convert it to MP3. And if you have a video that is, for example, in AVI or MPG, you can convert it to MKV, for example. It can move files from one location to another, and it automatically executes the file, but to rename the files if it's needed. It can compress files if they're pretty old. So there's a lot of things that it can do. The documentation could be worked a little bit. So it takes you to docs.unmanic.app, and this is the documentation, and this is where I found the Docker Compose file example that he recommends. And the Docker image is found in Docker Hub on Josh5/UnManic. So that's what we're going to be using to build this up. So let's go into the NAS and quickly go over what we need here. First thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to go into FileStation. In FileStation, we're going to create a project for UnManic. Currently has nothing. And then in the containers, we're going to have a container folder for UnManic. And in here, we're going to have the config directory, and we're going to have the transcode directory. And we're going to pass our HTTPC that has all our media as our library to the container. So now that we have all the files that we need in the containers, UnManic, config transcode, and in the projects UnManic, we can then go into the container manager and then create our project for this application. So we can create UnManic, then we look for that path in the Docker projects that we created for this, and we say we're going to create a Docker Compose file. I'm going to get my Docker Compose file example here, and I'm going to save it, but we're not going to start the project yet because I just want to explain what it does. So here we're going to the big window, and we can see that we're starting a service named UnManic. We're going to be using the Josh5 UnManic latest image. We're going to name the container UnManic, We're going to specify our usual environment variable. So in my case, the time zone is America, New York. My admin user is 1026, and the group for that user is 100. If you're going to use another user, you need to figure out what are the values of this by logging into your NAS on SSH, and then you can do the ID command and then put the name of that user that you want the IDs for after the word ID. And then in here, we're going to pass the path to the config folder that we created, which is this one here. And the path for the transcode is going to be here too. And then the library is going to be here. So as you can see, the left side is in the NAS. So I'm passing the UnManic config to the /config in the container. Then my HTPC folder as the library folder in the container. And the transcode folder as the temp UnManic folder in the container. So that then it can store the stuff in our NAS where it needs to. This container by default is going to listen on port 8888, so I'm going to expose it on that too on my NAS. And if you want to set some limits on the resources that it can use, for example 1 GB of memory only, then you can do it here. And we say we want this container to restart always unless we manually stop it. So that's all that we have in this Docker Compose file. We can now, I don't have anything to save, so we can go into action and then build. And this is going to create that container. I had already pulled the image, so it was pretty straightforward. It was starting the container. As you can see, I have that image here, and the container is running. So we can go into the logs and check here, and it's done updating. So it looks like everything is working fine. It's recognizing the proper user. I don't see any more updates. So now we should be able to go into another tab on the IP of the NAS on port 8888, and immediately we get this. The user interface for UnManic starts, and it tells us about the version that we're running, which currently is 028, when it was published, and other information here about it. So I'm going to click outside, and then we'll see here the user interface for the application UnManic. I don't have any files in the lab NAS right now, so my library is empty, and there's nothing to do here. But to configure the application, you have to go here on the hamburger icon, and then this panel is going to open on the left side of the screen. You can change your view here if you want it on dark mode or light mode. And then in here, the dashboard is the main page where you get to the application. If you have any files, you can trigger a rescan of your library there. Then if you go into the settings, here's where you configure all your stuff. By default, it's going to create a random library here with a random name. You can click here and then you configure it. So you can change the name, look for the path to that. Let's say, for example, I had files in my NAS, and I would go into media, for example, TV, and I will select that, click out, and then that gets updated, and then it'll say that this library is pointing to there. And then I can make other changes here, like I wanted to be scanned automatically and stuff like that, and send a priority and stuff. But that's it. So we have the library, it updated, and then here we can enable periodic library scans, and then how long we want in time for that to happen. You can trigger a startup run, so whenever the container starts up, it does a run on checking the library, and it also allows you to use symlinks in your library. And then here we have how many processes can test your files. So by default, it's going to start at 2, and then it says that do you want to clear all the tasks that are pending on startup? You can enable this or not. And then again, for the completed tasks, you can also enable this that says automatically manage the tasks. And then you submit to save those changes that you have made, and that saves that. Now the workers, like I said, this is capable of transcoding audio and video files. So you need to have workers for this. And this is going to be the path that is going to use to do the transcoding. Remember, this is a folder that we created and we pass to the container, so it's using that. So then you click on the plus sign here, and then you create a group of workers, and then you specify how many worker processes you want and tags and all that stuff. That's honestly information that I'm not aware of, so I'm not gonna try to pretend that I know what goes on in here. And then you can set up a schedule here too. I really hope that the documentation is updated, because there's a lot of stuff that I have not seen on the documentation. This is, I would say, is one of the greatest things that I've found in this application, is that it has plugins that you can add to the application. So you can, if you have a file, you can install it from here, or you can go to the repo here and then refresh the repository, and then boom, it loads all of those plugins that have been created by the community, mainly by Josh5, which is the developer. And as you can see, it has a lot of nice little things like transcoding audio files. So there's a plugin for that. There's a plugin to move files. There's a plugin for putting a metrics panel with the file size on the application. There's also, like, for example, reorder audio streams by language in videos, I assume. So there's a lot of stuff here that you can use that allows you to do a lot of nice stuff. Like, for example, if you're running Sonar, you can let Sonar know, hey, I worked on a file, you can now pick it up and do something with it. Same if you have Discord, you can connect it to Discord and send notifications and stuff like that. So this application looks pretty robust and is growing nicely, so congrats to the developer. And then on link, I am assuming that this refers that you can connect to another instance of UnManic, and then you would have to connect it here using the address of the installation, and then if you need to authenticate or not. So that's how you do that. Here's links for the documentation, and basically you can change the language here. So we can go back here into the home, and then we have the data panels. We don't have any data panels, so we have to install from the plugins if we want to do that. But remember, we saw one that said you can see like a graph of file sizes and stuff. If you enable that, you come here and you'll see that in here. And if you want to log in here, you can log in with GitHub, Discord, and Patreon. And basically that's it. It's pretty straightforward. The application doesn't have a lot, but it seems like it's growing very nicely, and it's going to be a very good tool. So I'm going to leave it as here because I have not used the app. Now you should be able to have a container that is up and running, and then you can start playing around with it and trying to figure out how you can connect it to your Rs or any other application that you have that gets you your content, because that's one thing that I would assume that is going to be tricky with this application, because I guess you could make it less tricky if once your Rs dump the files where they're supposed to be, then you can just process them there. But honestly, I'm not sure how that works. It should be kind of similar to TDAR in my opinion, but I do not have the experience. So get on, play with it, because now you should have a working instance in your Docker container, and reply in the comment section below if you were able to connect it to your existing stack of applications and how you did it and what's the benefits that you have found from using the application. So I'm going to leave it at here. The container runs and now you can play with it, and I hope it satisfies the 2 people that placed their request for this video. If you like the content, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you have not subscribed. That really helps us grow, that really helps us reach a bigger audience, and hopefully in the future we can get sponsors and things like that. All of these videos, or a lot of the videos, I create based on comments that I get from people that want to see content featured on the channel. So if there's something that you want to see, hit me up with a comment what application you'd like to see. If possible, please provide the GitHub repository so that then it's easier for me to identify it. Sometimes I've gotten requests where I don't even know what they're requesting because there's a lot of things that have sort of a similar name. So that's going to be good if you do that. And you should have noticed that there was no ad on my video, and that is on purpose. I'm not monetizing the channel, so that also means that I'm not getting any money from putting the effort in making these videos. So if you want to support me, there's a link in the description below for PayPal where you can donate. There's also a Bitcoin address that you can donate if you prefer to do it that way. So I'll highly appreciate it if you do that. I shout out to the people that donate to the channel in the beginning of the next video from the moment that they donated. And I try to prioritize the videos that are requested by donors. So just know that. If you place a request, it might take some time, but I'll eventually get to that. Sometimes it's just I'm having troubles getting it to work, so I'm trying to investigate how to get stuff going for you. So if you place a request and the video hasn't come out, just know that it's probably that. If I'm not going to make a video for some reason, I'll reply to you and I'll tell you why. So if you haven't gotten a message like that, it means that it's still in the queue. So that's going to be it for this one. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.